Jon Mendez here with another of our little how-tos. This one's about anchor winches and just the annual service. This is not how to strip and take the whole thing apart, but just something I recommend on a yearly basis, just so it all runs smoothly. One thing we've got to be careful, chain eats fingers, so safety is really important. So once we've made the chain secure, then we can isolate all the power so there's no chance of us niggling on any switches or somebody inadvertently pushing a switch and us losing a finger. Very important. Once that's out of the way, we can start disassembling. Okay, so you can see I've got all the paraphernalia I need, a couple of Allen keys, actual anchor winch releaser, and then this boat has a safety strop which will stop the anchor going down at sea, or if we're anchored. Need to get that out of the way, but I also need to take the weight of the anchor off the capstan at the back here. So to do that, I just use a piece of rope through the chain, put the weight of the chain onto a cleat, and then release the anchor down a bit so that the cleat and this bit of rope are holding the weight. At that point, I can go and isolate the motor so that there's no chance of it turning before I'm ready, and then we'll start disassembling. So I'm just using an old fender line, but you can use anything. I'm going to use, as long as it's strong enough, thread that through the chain. And then I'm going to make it off on the cleat. And just to be doubly sure, I'm going to tie it around there. So that means that when I take this metal off, like so, when I drop the chain, the weight will be taken on my bit of rope here. So let's just do that. Now you can see my chain is all slack. So what I'll do in a second is remove the big metal plate that feeds the chain down into the anchor locker below, and that will allow me to take the chain off completely and just move it out of the way. So I've isolated the battery switches, I've checked that the helm switches for the anchor don't work, and now just down here I'm just going to make sure that these are both dead. There's no movement, so that's fine. I can now actually take it apart without my fingers getting chopped off. I'm going to remove this metal plate, which effectively feeds the chain as it goes round the capstan down into the anchor locker. So anything on the bow of the boat always gets quite tight because of all the salt water about. So I'm just being quite gentle. There we go. That's them both loosened. No, a little bit more. It's always the way, isn't it? There we go. Now, you've got to be really careful with anything on the bow of a boat not to lose any bits over the side. So I've got a tray which I lay all the bits on, and when we put it all back together we're going to lube everything, so it's quite important that, particularly with a teak deck, we don't get grease all over everything. Hence I've got gloves for when we come to the greasy bit. So that just unclips, pop that on there as well, and now you can see the chain. Because I've got it loose, I can just lift it off the capstan. So an anchor winch is a very simple device. This one's got a warping drum on the top for rope and a capstan for chain underneath. We just tend to use it for chain, but that's fine, it can be either. How it works is there's a clutch inside, which is basically two metal plates, one underneath, one on the top, that bite onto these two parts and connect them to the shaft which spins all the time. So the clutch, which is operated by this bit at the top, when you want to release it, you undo, and it needs a good thump once just to get it going, and then that will release. If I wanted to use it, I tighten it up and give it one thump, and that binds the clutch together. Now, because it's pulling up chain, which is in the sea, and all the associated stuff and debris that comes with that, it all gets full of salty water. So rinsing it off when you've finished anchoring is really good, and cleaning it out once a year, or if you anchor a lot, more than once a year, is really sensible. So having released the clutch, the next bit I've got to do is this metal plate in here stops me lifting it all off. So I've got to release that, and oh, actually it turned really easy. That was quite loose, so we'll undo that. Note I put all my bolts in the order that I took them out, so when I come to put back together, there's a chance I'll get it right. So that allows me to release the base. We finish undoing this. And then in here, there'll be a washer, which is always a bit fiddly. There we go, washer. And then in theory, this all lifts off. So at the beginning, I mentioned the clutch. Well, there's two parts to the clutch. There, these were a little bit stuck together. There's the second part of the clutch. So in here is the clutch on the top of the capstan, and there is the clutch on the bottom of the drum. And the idea of the clutch is that pinned, this all turns as one, because this turns all the time because it's got teeth on the groove. Pinned, this turns that. Release the clutch and this bit can spin, so you can warp a rope in without turning the anchor. Or you can release the anchor just on gravity by releasing this clutch from this, which you did by undoing the top. So to clean up, you can just wash it off with fresh water if you want. I'm going to use a bit of spray to assist. This is just a cleaner and rust remover. Be careful if you've got teak decks. And then just agitate nicely. This one's actually not in bad condition. So all I'm going to do is just use some paper towel, mainly because I don't want to flush all the dirt over the nice teak deck, to just pick up the worst of all of that. That's what the bucket's for, so we can just dispose as we go. So I've had a good clean in here to remove all the grit and debris. Very good clean around here. I know it's not shiny spotless, but I'm feeling the surface of the clutch, which is this bit and then this bit here. And I've got just a weeny bit more cleaning to do there. As I turned it over, some extra bits have fallen out the middle. And you can see there's some metal pins which allow you to remove this clutch if it wore. So basically it's a wear plate. And the same here, this can be removed as well if it was worn. Luckily we don't need to do any of that. What we do need to do is make sure we lubricate it nicely when we put it back together. So we're going to put plenty of grease on the shaft, because this bit turns all the time, which means this bit turns, but only when this bit, which is spinning, bites against it. So that doesn't turn until the clutch here is spinning and turns the whole thing. So the clutch is the really important bit. If you burn the clutch out, you've got to either have a new winch or take it all apart and do the spares. So I'm just going to pop some gloves on for grease moment, because otherwise I end up with grease everywhere. Just usually use one, and I'm going to put plenty on here on the shaft, a little bit along here, a bit in the bottom. And we're just using a marine waterproof grease. You just push down, get a bit out. And what's nice to see with this winch is the owner's obviously been fairly fastidious about washing it down whenever they finished anchoring. You can do it when you get back to port, but using copious amounts of fresh water to wash all the salt and as much of the junk off as possible is what makes your winch live. So reassembly, looking from above, just so we get it in the right place, and that slides all the way down. You can feel it's gone all the way. I'm going to put the washer on now so I don't forget, and the top piece on, but I put a little bit of lube on the washer and I put a little bit of lube in the top hole there, just so that it's all undoable next time. So just wind that in, and then again we're going to start putting the bits back. So this bit of metal forces the chain back down this hole. I'm just going to snug that up tight. We're going to put the cover back on, and what that really does is it stops water going down into the chain locker. So short one was this side, long one was this side. Don't snug them up until you've got both sorted, because it's quite easy to put it slightly out of line, tighten it, and then not be able to get the second bolt in. So get them in and just gently snug. They don't have to be humongously tight, just so they're secure. Right, so now all that's left to do is to tighten the clutch and the winch will work. So what I'm going to do though is I'm going to put the power back on so I can just show you the two modes that the winch works in. All right, back in a second. So with the top undone, when I press on the winch, the top is spinning but the bottom isn't. What that means is the bottom's spinning independently of the motor. So with the clutch undone, the anchor can manually release just on gravity and free fall. When I want to bring it back up, I've got to tighten the clutch down, put the handle on, give it a little thud to make it tight, and now when I press up, it's bringing the chain and the capstan all in one. So this turns all the time, this is independent, allows the anchor to free fall down all on its own on gravity if you don't want to release by using the motor. Very simple and quite a good safety feature, because it means if you lost all your electric power you can drop the anchor, and that's a really good reason to service your winch, because otherwise it will jam up in here, won't work. So now we'll bring the anchor all the way up. Make sure it's right way around. That's up. So now we can put our safety lanyard back on, and then we can undo all of that. Job done.